Welcome to the Fertility Rewire podcast. I'm your host, Kat Stevens, a fertility therapist, educator, and advocate. I want to share with you what you should have been told, what you should be being told, and basically to arm you on this journey so that you have the right information to be able to ask the right questions to get the answers you need. You can find me at fertilityrewire.com. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. In this episode, I am going to talk about secondary fertility. Now, it's something I've spoken about before. It's something I work with a lot. But if you are trying for your first child, I know that this episode could be triggering for you. So it might be one to skip for now. So I've been prompted to talk about secondary fertility specifically for a couple of reasons. One, as yet again, a client has told me what her GP, her general practitioner, has said to her when she has asked for fertility test and she's asked for support. And this has happened to a couple of clients of mine, and they've been told, well, you've already got one child, you should be happy with that. Yes, actually told that by the doctor, which is shocking. Now, it then brought me to the question, should you be happy with one child? Now, should you? It's an incredible question, really, and it's not one that you can really get your head round until you have had your first child. Now, the reason that I talk about that specifically, you may well have set out with plans at the very start of your fertility journey saying that, it wasn't a journey then, it was just a plan for the future, that you would like to have 2 children, or you would like to have 3 children, or ideally you would like to have more potentially. And then when you have experienced difficulty, when you are struggling to conceive, when you are on a journey, it comes a point where you would just be happy with one. And a lot of my clients, a lot of friends have said that. I just want a child. And then when you have had a child, everything can change. Not for everybody, but for some people, everything can change. Because when you have a child, everything from that point on becomes about them, and it becomes about their future. So it isn't a desire for a second child. It is a desire for a sibling. It isn't a desire for a third child. It is desire for another sibling. It's not being greedy. It's about the support for your child through their childhood and beyond. And often we tend to think about what will happen when I'm old. Where's the support? I don't want them to have to do that on their own. Or it could be that, what about when you're gone? Or just to have that person with them, to have those family Christmases and to have time with cousins and to have that closeness, which, if you think back to your own childhood and your relationship with your sibling isn't necessarily there, but it is a different drive. So I'm curious to know, how have you been treated by the GP in your trying for a second child or more? Have you been to the GP, or have you thought, well, I'm not going to get any support? Because here in the UK, we have funded IVF within certain criteria. In most places in the UK, you get one go, but in some, I was speaking to someone earlier today, in some you get 3 goes. But you get that one go of funded IVF if it is your first child. And interestingly, It might be your first child, but if it's your partner already has a child, you don't qualify. So there are some criteria there, but you do not get funded IVF for a second child or more. So often, if you're aware of that, you won't even go to the GP because you might think there's no point because you're going to have to pay. Now, you don't have to pay for the tests at the GP. You can have fertility tests free through the NHS. Obviously, it's a different system in different countries, but here in the UK, that is how it is. So you can have the tests because then you can do something about them. You still have to wait for the same amount of time, 6 months if you're over 35, a year if you're under, but you can access the test. And again, they are limited tests. I've said this before. They are tests that are aimed at IVF. They are tests that are aimed at any other form of assisted fertility treatment. Is it okay to want to extend your family? I'll say to you now, absolutely categorically, yes, it is okay. Is it something that you're being questioned or treated differently or not as you would wish by your GP or society as a whole? You know, I talked about platitudes with miscarriage, and it's the same thing here. Oh, well, at least you've got one. And then you will start to say potentially, I should be happy with one. I should be happy with one. But should you? Should you? Why do you want to extend your family? Sit and think about that for a moment. Why do you want to extend your family? And that's okay. It is okay. So feelings of guilt can come about quite easily, especially when you're in the fertility space on social media. It's not generally that you would put your foot forward and comment in a group where there are people who haven't conceived their first child, that you would put your foot forward and say you're trying for a second. So it's important to have that support. It's important to have that knowledge to be able to know what you can do. Interestingly, with secondary fertility issues, or secondary to either your first or your second child, if you like, there are some key factors that I see. I see a lot of changes in the menstrual cycle after having first child, and there has been some changes potentially structurally following birth. If there's been surgery, there may be issues, and this is something that we're seeing quite a lot. The period itself can be different, which can demonstrate that, but also hormonal imbalance. Really commonly, I'm seeing changes in ovulation and changes specifically to the luteal phase. Now, you might have more stress, you might have less sleep, you might have more going on when you're trying to conceive your second or third child, and these have massive impacts on the menstrual cycle, on the luteal phase, and things change. All tests are a photograph of what's going on. A blood test is like a photograph. It could be different 10 minutes after you'd had that blood test. It could certainly be different a week. It can certainly be different years after you've had that test. Sperm is the same. Sperm changes. Things are very, very different. So it's important, I would suggest, before you start trying for your second, that you have a health check, that you look into it, that you understand your menstrual cycle. I'm guessing if you're listening to this, you're further down the line there. So everything I've said in all these episodes rings true, but there is a different emotional element to this, and it is really, really key. There can also be a significant emotional element related to your experience of your birth with your previous child. It can also be affected massively by how long did it take you to conceive, how long did you to conceive your second. If you're trying for a third, did you have to have IVF with your first child? Are you assuming that that would be the same? Because it isn't necessarily the case. So, I believe that lots of people have IVF who, if we looked into it more deeply, if we weren't just doing the limited tests with the huge reference ranges that we do, if we supported people much earlier on with fertility and educated them widely, then they wouldn't necessarily have had an issue. I have friends, I know people who have had 2 children through IVF and then very quickly had an unexpected 3rd child because they assumed they couldn't get pregnant. So it does change. It is important that you know it is okay to want a 2nd or 3rd child. It's more important for you to know that there may well be a reason. And the doctors, you can have tests, you can have home tests, and a lot of my clients will have private home tests. There are a lot we can do to support you when you are trying for a 2nd baby. Now, because of these aspects of the specifics when you already have a child, because of this aspect of where you sit in terms of getting support, I have created a group program called Conceivable, and this group is specifically for people who are trying to extend their family. So already have 1 child or 2 or more. It is a group program and I am beta testing it. So if you're trying to extend your family, I'm going to be running this beta version of my program, or pilot version. And in terms of what beta means, basically that you get a fantastically discounted price, as it's the first time I've run it in this format. And in return, you will help me develop it further, and I will ask you for some feedback. So I wanted just to put that in there, that if you are trying to extend your family, it is okay. There can be things that can be done. You don't have to spend a huge amount of money to do it. You can really get to grips with what's going on with your body, the changes that have happened within your body since you've had a child, how things in your life are different, if sleep is affected, if stress levels are different, what is going on for you. It's, there are key differences within that. There is that feeling of, should I be happy? Should I be happy with 1? Or even, people saying, I should really be happy with 1. But you can take this and you can become your own fertility detective, as I say many, many times, and you can get to the bottom of it, but you have to know where to look. And that's where I come in when I'm working with people. So if a group program where you would also get that community of other people going through the same thing is something that sounds good to you, then drop me a line. You can send that to me. If you're on my emailing list, then I'll be contacting you about this anyway. If not, visit fertilityrewire.com and join the mailing list, or just drop me an email to kat@fertilityrewire.com and say you'd like to know more. Okay, so I hope that's been useful. It is important that we look at secondary fertility as a separate issue, because there are differences. There are huge emotional impacts and society impacts, and a huge feeling of guilt that runs through this at a very, very deep level. So I hope that's been helpful. You can find me in the usual places on social media at Fertility Rewire. I'm on TikTok now, if I haven't told you that already. And hopefully I will be speaking with you soon. Take care. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And whether you're trying for your first child, your second child, or more, Whether you've just started on your journey or you've been on the twists and turns of this for a long time, I really hope this information is going to help you ask the right questions to get the right answers. And if you want to know any information about Fertility Rewire, about working with me, or the free resources that I have available, please visit www.fertilityrewire.com. Until next time.